Now stay tuned for more live, original, locally produced programming right here on The Voice, 17104.com. Faith-based, community-driven streaming media from the Allison Hill District of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hello and welcome. I'd like to invite you to just enjoy the experience that we're about to encounter. I'd like to introduce to you a man of a very humble beginning, a man that was able to overcome the horrific misclassification of special education. A caring man, a man that will encourage you because he's been there and done that. And I'd like to encourage you to keep an open mind and be empowered to change your life. I'd like to present to you a man of men, Richard Utley. Richard Utley.
Good evening. I'm Tony Ross, subbing today for Richard Utley for today's episode of Did You Know? Tonight's episode focuses on this past year in state politics and a look towards 2024. We have three brilliant experts to have this discussion. First, we have a longtime friend of the program and a personal friend, John Baer. We have Steve Caruso, Spotlight reporter for Spotlight PA, and we have Berwood Yost, the director of Center for Opinion Research. And in full disclosure, at Franklin and Marshall, I am a diplomat and a Franklin and Marshall graduate. So just so everybody knows who's involved. So, Berwood, my first question is for you. You initially went out and did a polling on Governor Shapiro, and I think it was in the spring, and he was polling at 75% good to excellent ratings. Where is he now, and what do you see about what voters are concerned about?
So, hey, Tony, how you doing? It's good to be here with you tonight. So, Governor Shapiro is almost a sort of throwback candidate when you look at his job approval ratings. In recent times, it's been hard for candidates for office to score, job approval ratings in the upper 40% or higher. Shapiro's well above that. He's in fact, at this point in his first term, the most popular governor we've seen since Tom Ridge, which was a political generation ago, right? The number of independent and swing voters is much smaller than it used to be. And so that makes it harder for incumbent office holders to have high job approval ratings, particularly if they're not in the midst of a re-election campaign. And, Governor Shapiro's numbers have been very high. And they really, they started off pretty good. I would say the jumping off point for him came after the collapse, the roadway collapse down near Philadelphia, and the way that he handled that seemed to boost his numbers. And even with the budget impasse, he hasn't lost any strength. So at this point, he's polling very strongly, and I think he's in a great position. Now, we can talk more about some issues and things like that, but at the moment, voters seem generally happy with the way he's doing his job.
Great. John, you have any thoughts on the governor?
Yeah, I do, Tony. Thanks. And good to see you again. He had Shapiro, in my opinion, I can't remember a governor in the 40 years that I've been writing about Pennsylvania politics who came into office better prepared, better acclimated than Josh Shapiro. Here's somebody that served in the legislative branch, served at the county level as a county commissioner in Montgomery County, served at the statewide level as state attorney general. Three different levels of government. You don't find a lot of people, A, who have done that, and B, who have the political savvy to run a campaign. Imagine Tony and Berwood and Steve, imagine 5 years ago, any Democrat running for an open seat governorship not facing a primary. That's how good Shapiro was coming in, and that's how widely recognized it was. So on the one hand, it shouldn't be a surprise that he's polling well, because he's managed a political career like few before him have done. On the other hand, the danger is, and I'll be interested to watch his polling going forward, is the level of expectation that brings. If there isn't sort of a major step forward in progress in legislative areas, in economic areas, in growth areas, in the education areas, which are now critical, if things continue to get snaggled up, he'll have to bear some of that blame. And with the level of expectation, it would come a little harder than with somebody else.
Steve, do you have any thoughts you'd add about Governor Shapiro?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say, looking at the last 11 months or so, like Harrisburg has been a bit of a mess. I don't think that's an opinion. I think that's from been in the middle of it. And it seems like the Governor Shapiro has done a really good job of sort of trying to present himself as like above it. He kind of ran on this platform, I can make Harrisburg work. And now that he's there as governor, he has done he's kind of, especially since the June budget impasse, he's kind of backed off and kind of said, look, I am the only governor in a swing state with divided legislature, so I'm just going to kind of let the legislative leaders do their thing. And then as Berwood noted, like, he kind of had a few chances to flex his executive muscle, like he had the I-95 bridge collapse, he had the East Palestine stuff. So, I think like he's managed to do a really good job of, I think, marketing himself and marketing his actions so far to sort of just seem like he's in it, but like managed to somehow separate his brand from all the dysfunction that we have seen in Harrisburg since January.
Well, you make a good point of talking about the budget. I wanted to ask you about that to the panel. It's not working, I guess, again for the umpteenth year in a row. And what do you say? What are the issues at hand? I think we just got a bill passed dealing with non-prefers just the other day. So what's the status of it, and what do you think the implications of it are?
I guess I'll jump on that. Just I'd say really quick, like we're still in a budget impasse. We finally got funding for the state-related universities, Penn State, Temple, Pitt, Lincoln, but that's 5 months later than the deadline. There's still a lot of little things that need to be fixed to get money out to a lot of really important things like libraries, like Head Start, domestic violence shelters. Some people are really starting to feel a pinch without some of this stuff done. And all of this kind of traces back to Shapiro sort of backtracking on something he said he wanted, which was school vouchers, money so that families are in low performing school districts can send their kid to a private school. And there's been a lot of rhetoric back and forth, but that's fundamentally what happened. And we're still kind of waiting on a resolution to that. So I as we get closer and closer to the new year and Governor Shapiro having to issue his second budget address without the first one really being complete, I'm kind of waiting to see what thaws in the right places to get the deal done.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there. I mean, the polling that we did at the start of the impasse in August showed that very few people blamed him for the impasse. And I don't know when that would change, right? That's the key question. When does he start being blamed for problems with the budget, which I'm not sure how many people really, I'm not sure how many people really know it's not passed, right? You have to pay close attention to understand the details of this. And I'm not sure how many people are doing that. And, I just wanted to jump on something John said too. And that is, there are a plethora of issues out there. People just aren't happy with their personal financial circumstances. They have real concerns about the economy. They have real concerns about our government and our politics, and yet none of that seems to have fallen on the governor yet. And I mean, it's the same question as we're asking about the budget issue: is when do these other issues start to start to have an impact on how people feel about him. And I'm not sure. I just raised this because I'm not sure if issues are as important as sort of the image that Steve mentioned, right? That he sort of has this brand of being moderate and accommodating and welcoming. I mean, you go through the list of characteristics that we would think a good politician has, and he seems to demonstrate them consistently. And I mean, that's what the voters seem to tell us. And I guess I'm sort of at this point, like when does the substance of our circumstances catch up with the image that he has? When do those two things collide? Maybe never, because he's very skillful, but maybe they will. I don't know if John, what you think about that, but I am torn about this kind of the image of the thing and the issues.
Yeah, no, it's a great thought and certainly something to watch. On the budget thing, Tony, I think that the governor, at least for now and for probably some while, has some cover because the legislature has never been able to do anything. And people know that and people expect that. And, there's no disappointment there. And so they don't blame him because he's new, he's different. And the key to his brand, Berwood, is success.
Yeah.
He has never lost an election. He has never known anything so far in his political career except success. And people like that. People like the fact that you can be a leader, you can be involved in issues. And it's not like he was somebody who coasted in every office that he held. He was very progressive in trying to make change and trying to make a difference. And over time, that builds up. So he has this sort of, for now, sort of a shield to protect him poll-wise from things that the legislature is incapable of getting, and I'm always amazed year after year that when they let the budget go unresolved for so long, and you're right, I mean, most people don't notice, don't care, don't have any direct impact, but it just adds to the tarnish. And when we get to the 1st of December, that's when their annual automatic pay raises kick in, and that gets reported, and that reminds people, hey, every year we pay these people more and more. Now the base salary is going to be over $106,000 a year. We pay them more and more to do the same thing over and over and over. And again, by contrast, by comparison, somebody like Josh Shapiro looks pretty good.
Well, let me tell you, John, you raised a very interesting point to me as a former House staffer about the legislature. And I know that right now we have a very slim majority in the House, basically leaning towards the Democrats. But how does this affect what's going on with the budget in general, and how does it affect what in general what's going on in the House? Will the Democrats remain in charge? Because I understand there's some political questions about people who are leaving to go to other offices. Can you expand upon that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be, because it's so close in numbers, there's going to be ongoing turmoil until next year. I mean, if you can make a difference in the size of a majority next year, you might be okay. But Democrats being Democrats, they will always gravitate to chaos. I mean, that's just their home planet. And so that really is nothing new. One thing that surprised me, Tony, and I'd love your thinking on this, I was surprised that when Shapiro said he backed school vouchers, let that be known in his campaign and leading up to budget negotiations, and could not get the House to get on board. My thinking was, wouldn't House leadership say to themselves, this guy has great numbers, a great future. He's the future of this party for at least several years. Why would we not support his thinking on this? And this was not a vast change in education. It was a trial to see what would happen if we did this. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't think public education in Pennsylvania could be better. Why wouldn't Democratic leadership just look beyond short term, look beyond the next election, look beyond immediate, leftist thinking and think about the future. Why didn't they do that?
Well, let me let the other panelists jump in on this, and then I'll jump in. So, Steve, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I could briefly say is that having watched this House Democratic majority now for 11 months, they might have a one vote margin, but they've recognized that when you have a one vote margin, you hang together or you hang separately. And so they vote as a block. Look, you will find there are plenty of House Democrats who are supportive of alternatives to public schools, charter schools, private schools. But I think there was just this general feeling that the school vouchers was for Josh Shapiro's political legacy, and House Democrats have their own priorities. I don't think that there is publicly the two are going to be tight, but I think there is just a realization within Harrisburg that what gets Josh Shapiro reelected and what gets House Democrats reelected are very different things. And that, House Democrats have, they want to see more money for low performing public schools. They want to see more money for housing, repair grants. They want to see, a medical debt relief program. They have a lot of their own projects that they want to see, or even stuff going beyond that, a minimum wage increase or stricter gun laws. They have a lot of stuff that they ran on and they want to get done. And, looking at the budget deal, I think House Dems just felt that, we are not getting that much out of it while selling out a pretty, a very key lobby in the form of teachers unions, but also a lot of parents and activists who think that public schooling is the best option for society.
Berwood, can you tell us how does school choice poll with voters?
Yeah, well, actually, it's almost in our most recent polling an even split, about 48% favor doing vouchers, about the same number oppose it. So it's a highly divisive issue. And it's of course partisan, but it's also geographic. And
Right.
this is why I share some of John's sort of disbelief about this. I understand, as Stephen has talked about, the politics of it and the constituencies associated with the Democratic Party. But it seemed to me that this being such a big Republican priority, part of the legislative process is making trades. And I would think you could get something for this, right? And if Democrats could have used this as leverage, they may have been able to get some of those other priorities that Stephen was talking about, right? But the other point I would make is this geographic point, in that if you're in an area where money flows strongly and the public schools are better, you're more opposed to this initiative than if you're in other communities, right? And so there's a lot of support for this in Democratic communities, even though the Democratic kind of Party itself is not fully for it. So, I understand staying away from it because it is divisive. But then again, it seems to me like they had a chance to nick away at an issue that maybe they could have gotten something for legislatively, and it would have certainly appealed, I think, to certain constituencies within the party. So I really didn't get it, and I thought Shapiro would make it happen.
Yeah, I think that Steve makes a good point with it. I think the bottom line is the strong teachers unions put the squash on it, as you know. I think they look at people like Tony Williams and others who are strong supporters of choice who have been defeated when they tried to move up. I think that played a role as well. So that's what I would say. I wanted to ask you one more question about, I'm sorry, go ahead. Is somebody going to say something? Oh, okay. Well, I wanted to ask you another question about the governor, and then we'll move on. Mike Verb, the legislative secretary, and the controversy with him and what went on with the payout to the Senate staffer. Can you give us a update about what happened and what is going on with that?
Caruso, give us the facts.
Well, so look, Mike Verb was Josh Shapiro's legislative director, and other than that, so basically that means he's basically Shapiro's lobbyist. He's the one going to the legislature and saying, these are our priorities, we want to get this done. But stepping back from that, I mean, Verb has been a top Shapiro aide since he became Attorney General. Before that, he was a Republican member of the State House from Montgomery County, the same county where Shapiro hails from. And basically what happened is that there was an allegation that surfaced in the it had been bubbling up, and then it really came out in I believe it would have been September, October, where a former Shapiro staffer who was underneath Verb in the legislative office accused Verb of sexual harassment. This was then settled, and as the settlement came to light in the press from a number of outlets, Verb was suddenly let go of. Now, this has caused a lot of problems for a couple of reasons. I mean, first off, Harrisburg has a history of sexual harassment. This is not, Verb is far from the first person. I mean, we had another allegation cause of Democratic resignation in March, and you go back further, you'll find even more. He probably won't be the last. But for Senate Republicans in particular, they've kind of jumped on it, and I should say there's bipartisan concern about this in the Senate. But there's been some jumping on it of why, if the allegation was made in spring, if this was known for so long, and the settlement only reached in, I believe, roughly August, September, why did the Shapiro administration keep him around for so long in the middle of these high pressure negotiations, with the Senate, and that has caused some push to change Harrisburg's rules to try and add more transparency, and we're kind of in the middle of that right now.
John, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just thought the whole thing was horribly handled by the administration. It had to have angered Shapiro to no end, because this was somebody he was friends with, somebody he trusted, somebody who, according to one source, had said he had a reputation along these lines and had personally promised Shapiro this won't be an issue in the administration, and yet it became a big issue. Worse, this non-disclosure agreement was signed, and we're using public money. We're using $300,000 of public money to pay this woman to settle an allegation of sexual harassment. When I wrote about it, I said, you should not allow NDAs when public money is involved, because then NDA stands for no damned accountability. If it's public dollars, somebody needs to talk about it. Somebody needs to say what it's for. Somebody needs to say how much. So it's a horrible situation for Shapiro, because unlike capping oil wells, fixing bridges, getting a budget passed, this is something everybody pays attention to. You put a sexual harassment story up, especially involving a politician, that's going to get far more play than anything having to do with anything else in government.
And Berwood, have you seen any effect on Governor Shapiro's popularity with respect to this issue?
We haven't seen that change at this point. But again, there's been, I think there's hearings, there's movement on changing some of these rules. I believe some of the other facts of the case, particularly the use of taxpayer money, may have come out after our last poll. So we'll see when we're in the field.
Berwood, that's a tough thing to poll, because it's a complex story. I mean, I don't know how you break that down into an easily understood polling question.
That's a good. There are many such things in polling that we do with, but I mean, you can see one of the things though you can see indirectly is whether or not his overall favorability ratings and job approval ratings change, right? And so if there's a constant drumbeat of stories and people start to view that negatively, we'll see movement in his personal favorability ratings and in his job approval. So, so you may not have to ask the question directly. You can just see if there's sort of a carry-on effect.
Now let me move to, as you know, last year was an election year, and we had judicial elections statewide, and we had a number of winners. And would you like to take a stab at who won and what you saw in the elections, John or Steve?
Yeah, first, before Caruso starts giving us the details, let me just say that in October, I was with him at a press club event, and I said, "So, Steve, I guess in this critical state Supreme Court race, all the money and the Republican piling up against the Democrat will make a difference, and the Republican will win." And Steve just kind of looked at me like I had grown up on a turnip farm and basically said, "Well, actually, there's a lot of stuff going on the ground, and there's a lot of stuff coming, and I wouldn't be surprised if that makes a difference." So, Caruso, hats off. Give us the details.
Oh, thank you, John. I know you weren't born on a turnip farm, though. Don't worry. I would. So I mean, Democrats swept the statewide judicial elections, and it seems like that was in large part, I guess I'm still trying to figure out exactly why. I mean, a few of the theories I've heard is just sort of that judicial elections are for high information voters, well-educated voters, voters who, want to like turn out in a weird year. Like, who often thinks of elections happening in an odd numbered year? We think of presidential elections, that's in, in an even year, or maybe the midterms. But and what that kind of points to is that Democrats do really well in the suburbs, and those voters there who live in their fancy homes and turn out big, like they're mostly voting Democrat now. They used to more be Republican, but now they back Dems. And so I should say, Democrats retained a seat on the state Supreme Court. They keep a 5-2 majority up there. They flipped the Superior Court, which is the appeals court that handles like criminal cases. If you if you have a criminal case in your county and you appeal that decision, that goes to Superior Court. And then they gained a seat on the Commonwealth Court, which is another appeals court that handles a lot of election matters and a lot of other important stuff. So for Democrats, really good election day. And I should also add too, they spent a lot of money to get it done. They drastically outspent Republicans very late, blanketing the airwaves of ads that were funded by a lot of national groups, a few out-of-state billionaires. They really tapped into a national network of Democratic money, including some dark money groups. That's hard, like it's impossible to trace where they got their dollars from to flip this to run the table in the statewide races.
Berwood?
Oh yeah, I'm happy to talk about this. I mean, I was thinking, the title of your show was kind of a look back at this year in politics, and I do think these elections were the biggest story in politics this year. Typically you would think in an off-year election, as Stephen said, low information voters will come out, but so will people come out because they're not happy with the administration in Washington, right? Even though these are municipal elections separate from Washington, it's still Washington and how people feel about the president tend to drive turnout in these races. And, so just like 2022, we were looking at the job approval, maybe I should call them job disapproval numbers for President Biden, because there's far more disapproval than approval. And they're abysmal. And you look at those numbers, and then you look at who said they were going to vote, and you thought, man, it's going to be a tough year for Democrats. But then you think about 22 again, and you think about the abortion issue and how that has motivated voters, particularly suburban voters. And I think I've been looking at these numbers closely. They're not official yet, but a couple of things are very clear to me. One, turnout went up in a number of places, and it went up especially in Philadelphia and Allegheny County. I think we had about 300 and some thousand more voters this time compared to 2021, last time we elected a Supreme Court candidate. Many of those came from Philly and Pittsburgh, right? So you had a much greater share turnout in those cities. You had higher turnout as well in those suburban counties around Philadelphia, and everywhere, just about everywhere, the Democrats perform better. And so I think, for me, this underlying issue of abortion is something that Republicans are going to have to solve to do better. Now, there's a confounder here for me, at least, and that is, where you're sitting in Dauphin County, you've got a Democratic majority county commission for the first time in 100 years, right? And we saw a bunch of school boards that we thought would be contested and perhaps won by Republicans. That didn't happen. So, this municipal election was full of surprises, and most of those surprises were, I think, good news for Democrats.
Well, since we're talking about municipal elections, I have two that are very important, and I would like to get your take on them. In Philadelphia, the mayor's race to Sherelle Parker, and then the woman who won in Allegheny County. So the first time two women were elected. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think it's a reflection of the Democratic Party and the increasing strength that women have in politics and the increasing strength that they have, especially in the Democratic Party and everywhere else. We now have a legislature in Pennsylvania, which historically was a horrible place for women, both in the legislature and the statewide office. Now you have the House Speaker is a woman, the Senate President pro temp is a woman. But before we get onto that, the one thing that interested me about the November elections were, James Carville denigrated accurately Pennsylvania way back when he said everything between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia is Alabama. You have Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Alabama in the middle. And he's been misquoted on that. What he originally said was much more local. He originally said everything between Ballackinwood and Squirrel Hill, and everything in between. But Alabama is starting to creep a little bit west. If you look at the map that have the R&D map for the November election, there's now a couple of more. Berks County all of a sudden went blue. And I mean, you used to be able to win this state in a primary, in a general election, with 10 counties. You used to be able to get the edges.
Ed Rendell.
Right. Get the edges in Center County, where Penn State is, to go blue, and everybody else would go red, but you could still win because they're the more populous areas. Now it's starting to be, at least if this is a warning shot, Republicans ought to take a look, because now there's 13 or 14 counties that went blue, and that might make a difference. And Berwood, I think, is absolutely right. The impact of the abortion decision and its aftermath, and bringing out women and bringing out other voters. And I have to tell you, Republicans really need to do something, and they're not getting any help from the top. Karl Rove, who was George W. Bush's guru, writes for the Wall Street Journal. He had a piece a few days ago that said, well, abortion really wasn't the driving issue, because look at Virginia, where there was a split legislature and Democrats narrowly won both chambers, partly on the abortion issue. He said that's just a couple of small movements. That's not a big deal. But he never mentioned in his column Ohio, which was a reliable red state and voted to keep abortion legal. Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court race was driven, I think, by abortion. So it's clear that it is, even if Republicans like Karl Rove, they don't want to admit it, and they're going to have to address it, or the same thing could happen in 2024.
Steve Caruso, do you think you would add on this issue?
Yeah, I'll jump with two quick observations. And one is, I think John's completely right that Republicans don't have a good answer for how to talk about abortion. I think that there is, there's going to be a lot of back and forth about, is this messaging, is this policy driven? That's an internal conversation Republicans will have. And I think in general, what it kind of comes back to is, a lot of it's the difference between a primary election and a general election. Primary elections, you have to run to appease the people who are going to show up, and that's going to be the base of your party. And there's still just a lot of Republican voters who are going to want to hear pro-life slogans from the candidates without a lot of nuance. I mean, I talked to one Republican operative, Jeff Coleman, for a story, and he was like, "Look, we need to recruit candidates who are willing to have a nuanced conversation about this, and like not just turn abortion politics into bumper sticker slogans, and have Republicans can do that in their primaries. I mean, that's an issue for them to sort out." And you and Tony, you mentioned Sherelle Parker is now going to be the first female mayor of Philadelphia. Sarah Murato in Allegheny County is going to be the county executive. One thing I just want to note, and I think it's been one of the more interesting trends to watch, is that I feel like Philadelphia used to be known as like the more liberal part. I don't know if we use the word progressive 10 years ago, but like just where the most left sort of politics would be Philly, and Allegheny County was a bastion of still like blue dog Democrats. And it's been interesting to see in a lot of primaries and contests. Sarah Murato is more progressive than Sherelle Parker. Sarah Murato was endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America when she ran for state house. She won a very narrow victory, but a victory nonetheless to lead Allegheny County. Well, Parker actually bested two other progressive women to win her primary, and what I think a lot of people were, I don't know if I want to say it upset, but just what surprised some folks. And watching that dynamic in the Democratic electorates in Philly versus Allegheny County has been one of the more interesting dynamics I think to watch. As somebody who is went to school in Pittsburgh and now lives in Harrisburg, is going to be a Philadelphian soon. But just watching this that dynamic play out is one of the more interesting things for me as a political reporter.
Yeah, Tony, can I just jump in here? I agree with that. I've been kind of surprised at because if you look at the attitudes of the people who live in those communities, Philadelphia is almost on its own in how kind of liberal they are, how they're in their perspectives, traditionally liberal. And yet, the progressive candidates have not fared nearly as well in Philadelphia as they have in Pittsburgh. And I think, there's probably a lot of reasons for that, and we probably don't have time to talk about them, but it's an important dynamic, I think, to keep an eye on as our politics continues to change, because it really signals something, and it may signal sort of the Pittsburgh's a little more educated, a little less ethnically diverse, racially diverse than Philadelphia. So I mean, in some ways, it's hard to reconcile kind of liberal views on certain social issues, but perhaps more conservative views like religion in Philadelphia. So, there's just a lot of dynamics there, and it's really an important story that I don't think has been covered sufficiently.
Well, let me ask all of you if you have any questions or anything you would add, but are there any women that we should be looking for to come up in the future? Are there any future stars out here?
Well,
John,
there are. There are. All you need to do is look at the numbers of women who are now in the House and now in the Senate, now at municipal levels, now at mayors and county commissioners across the country. It's just they're not yet getting the attention because they're on deck. So, Steve, do you see anybody in the legislature that we ought to keep an eye
on? I haven't heard much speculation quite yet, but I think we do have Joanna McClinton, the first Black Speaker of the House, is that's a name that I think she's really been, I think, a very vocal, visible voice for the party. I feel like I see her popping up in national press conferences quite a bit with national groups in Democratic circles. To be clear, I've heard zero speculation about her. But another thing, John, I'd add too, we also have multiple Democratic women in our congressional delegation already after redistricting 2018. Yeah. All of whom I feel like I hear those names being thrown into statewide conversations every once in a while. So
yeah, that's a good point.
But no, I mean, look, I can't say I have heard too much about any open races, because it seems like there's a lot of entrenched incumbents in the statewide office, or one who's trying to get re-election in Bob Casey. But time's gonna crawl on, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more names as we get closer to races where there's a chance for people to jump in.
Yeah, Steve, that is a great segue to 2024. And we have some polling that Berwood just recently completed on President Biden and President Trump. So could you tell us a little bit about what you found out?
Well, I don't think there's any surprises here. We're looking at another very close race. When we did our polling, I think Biden might have had a 2-point advantage within that's within the margin of error of our poll. So essentially, we see a race that's closely contested. I think the thing that stands out the most for me is that there are a lot of people who are looking for an alternative. And, the big story for 2024 in my mind will involve what the ballot actually looks like. Who gets on the ballot? Is it, Kennedy? Is it Cornel West? Is it Jill Stein? In addition to Trump and Biden, that's gonna play a major role. There's probably 20% of the voters in this state who say they don't have a favorable impression of either President Biden or former President Trump. And those folks are a wild card. They could decide not to vote. They could decide to vote for a third party, or they could all make up their mind as they did in 2016. There was probably in 2016, 15 to 16% of voters who didn't like Hillary or Trump. A majority of them at the end decided to vote for Trump. You never know what they're going to do. And so, that's, to me, the shape of the ballot in the coming year in Pennsylvania is going to be vital for understanding who wins, because there's so much dissatisfaction with the two leading candidates at the moment.
Let me ask you, what happens to the Republicans in the primary? Is it over? Are you saying that,
No, I'm not. I think
Christie or the lady from South Carolina?
Yeah, Nikki Haley. Look,
Haley, yes.
Yeah, Nikki Haley. Look, in our last primary matchup, Trump still had an advantage, and he's only increased that advantage. Back in April, the first time we polled the primary, he had about a 6-point lead on Ron DeSantis. That lead is now up to 40 points. I don't know what that means at this point. Not a single vote has been cast. Trump has not shown up at a debate, and the field has narrowed. And so I think the issue Trump has right now is he looks invincible. And if somebody finishes a close second in Iowa to him, unexpectedly close, because remember, this is not about objective votes. This is about expectations. I think if somebody performs better than expected, we may have less certainty than we have now. But I'm certainly not saying that race is over. Let's let people cast a vote.
John, do you have an opinion about this? I know you covered national politics as well. What's your take?
Well, I can tell you, Tony, that every Democratic operative at the state and national level that I talk to is scared to death. And every Republican operative at the state and national level that I talk to thinks it's Trump. And the only reservation, the only caveat they add is they believe he will be convicted in Georgia and in the DC January 6th case. And they say that could present a problem. It is just when you step back, if you're from another country and you're looking at this and you say, well, let's see, American people say they don't want either of those guys to run. One of them could go to jail. The other one could just dodder into old age sooner than expected. And you can't believe this is the land of the free and the home of the brave. This is the choice we have. But I have to tell you, Tony, you may remember and maybe knew Harold Jackson, who was longtime editorial page editor at the Inquirer, Pulitzer Prize winner, now retired, living in Texas. He recently wrote an op-ed piece for the Inquirer that was headlined, "Biden's Problems with the Black Vote." if he is at all right, if Biden has a problem with the black vote, and the widely quoted New York Times Siena College poll that showed Biden trailing in key 4 or 5 key battleground states showed to me unimaginable numbers of support among black voters and especially black male voters for Donald Trump. You have to explain to me how that's the case, if it is the case. And, people say, well, look, you're only looking at 5 states. Yeah, well, they may be the only states that matter,
Right. That might be the election right
That
there.
could be the election right there. So if Joe Biden does have a problem like that, of that magnitude, then it's going to be a long night for Democrats next November. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. I mean, what are you hearing or seeing? It's tough for me to believe that, but are you hearing or seeing evidence of that?
Some a little bit. So, there's some people that are very concerned about the president's age. But then again, then you have the alternative. Which, you have to say what kind of race does Biden run? And obviously, he's going to run. He's going to say you guys are to be scared of hell of Trump. So,
Yeah.
there may be some truth to it, but I think at the end, it's going to be me or you're going to be scared to death of Trump.
Yeah.
Steve Caruso, what do you think? What's happening on the ground?
I haven't had a chance to start diving all the way into 2024 coverage. Still trying to pick apart a few things with our judicial elections and our unfinished budget. I am a government reporting nerd, but look, the main thing I can think of is that I think back on 2020, and that's a very special race in happening right in the middle of the pandemic. COVID is still very much a thing, but I just think about how what we saw was Biden win Pennsylvania, not handily, but in the end, it was close, but it wasn't like a squeaker. Like, I think he won by I can't remember the exact number.
Almost
But
100,000. I think he won by almost 100,000 votes.
Yeah. Biden won, and then down ballot, Republicans did really good. They won both row offices except for Josh Shapiro, as we've been talking about. They picked up seats in the House. I think they more or less kept their majority steady in the state Senate. I won, and Pennsylvania is a state that historically has split its ticket, and that's going away nationally. But I think, regardless of trying to make a prediction on Biden, Trump, if someone can come out in a primary and beat someone, I'm just super interested to look at once you get to a presidential turnout in 2024, when everybody's plugged in because a ton of money's thrown at mailers and ads and what have you. Do we keep seeing this ticket splitting, and how does it split next time? Is this going to be a year where maybe a lot of people say, I like Trump better despite all of everything that happened, but you know what, I'm going to vote Democrats otherwise because I like the Democratic brand. I just don't like Biden. Or are we going to see maybe Biden wins and Republicans do well, or are we going to see just a bunch of wacky results that don't seem to actually fit a narrative and have more to do with just people liking the individual brands of a Bob Casey, of a Stacey Garrity, of whoever the presidential nominees, or however it's all framed. My gut is I'm being optimistic because obviously national politics has been flattening everything in its path, and there's going to be a crap load of money dumped onto Pennsylvania. But we kind of already saw in 2020 some Pennsylvanians will still split their ticket quite a bit, and I wonder if that happens again in 2024.
Well,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I would just say, before we came on the air, we were talking about football. That's what most people are probably talking about. We're the probably 4 or 5 people talking about politics in the state right now. I mean, most people don't live it like we do. And, so I'm careful about those early polls. I think Biden does appear to be in real trouble. But at the same time, I think some Democrats have checked out. And the question is, do they check back in or not? I mean, that's the fundamental point about John raised about turnout among Democratic constituency, the point Stephen raised. I mean, I think people forget, Trump is polarizing, and it is a um, it'll be interesting to see what a sustained campaign for Biden looks like if he goes against Trump again. Because look, people were excited about Trump if they were Trump supporters, and people who voted for Biden were excited to get rid of Trump. They weren't necessarily that excited about Biden. And I think, part of what may play out here is the way that the Biden campaign, and we need to remember, incumbents are hard to beat. They have some natural advantages, and I think they're going to spend a whole lot of money reminding people of the chaos. And if, we don't know what's going to happen for sure, but I guess my broader point is most people, unlike us, aren't paying that much attention right now. And when they refocus, I suspect we may see some movement in some of these key numbers.
Well, another question I'd ask you: the Senate race, very important, for potentially the control of the Senate. We have our incumbent senator, U.S. Senator Bob Casey, against Dave McCormick. How do you see that race polling right now, and how do you guys see it right now at this point in the race?
Yep. If I can talk about the polls at the moment.
Yeah.
Right now, Casey has a comfortable advantage. He's not at a majority, but his job approval numbers are better than Biden's, not quite as high as Shapiro's. And he's running a few points ahead of David McCormick. And I think, if you're a Republican, after you saw what happened in 2022, I think they probably feel good about their candidate. So I guess I've been characterizing the race this way. It's going to be probably a competitive race, maybe as competitive race as Casey's ever had, if McCormick is his challenger. If I'm Casey, I feel pretty good about where I am. My numbers look like they did prior to my first election. But if I'm McCormick, he's not so wildly popular that I can't catch him. So, I think I expect if those are the two candidates, we'll have a pretty interesting race. My main question, though, is can McCormick kind of capture the magic that Republicans need these days, or does he go back and he build an old-fashioned Republican coalition, kind of like a Pat Toomey would build? I'm fascinated to see how he pulls his campaign together. What are his targets? Because I think he made a mistake when he ran in the primary, trying to. I understand he wanted that MAGA vote, but I think it didn't fit for him. And so has he learned for that? We'll see.
John and Scott, how do you see it? Steve, Steve.
When Steve said about a crap load of money being dumped in Pennsylvania next year, this is the race he's talking about. Republicans are going to be heavily invested. Democrats nationally are going to be heavily invested because it's one of those races that could well determine Senate control. On the one hand, it's difficult. Bob Casey is a legend in Pennsylvania, the family name, the longevity, his political ability to kind of straddle the mean girls of Washington and not really make a lot of enemies. Not wildly popular, but nobody dislikes Bob Casey. He's been around, he knows public service, he's dedicated to public service, and he's always had good numbers. The McCormick thing, McCormick has a little bit of an anchor because of the same thing that Oz has. He's coming from another state. Yes, he was born here. Yes, he worked here. Yes, he has family connections here and now has a house here. But he's going to be, I guarantee you, the Casey campaign will run a campaign against Connecticut's, McCormick. The fact that he recently mispronounced the oldest beer distributor in America here
Lord.
in Pottsville, called it Yangling beer when it's Yingling beer. It harkens back to the 1992 campaign of Lynn Yackel, who was running to unseat Arlen Specter in the year of the woman, and she was in Juniata County and said how happy she was to be in Juanita County. If you're not from a place, if you don't know the place, you tend to make those kinds of mistakes, and your opponents will cash in on those. I mean, the Casey campaign will document how McCormick over the last few months has flown in and out of Pennsylvania from Connecticut to go to events, to go to fundraisers, and that stuff is perfect for campaign ads and makes it a much bigger deal than it appears. But Pennsylvanians, having just gone through a Senate campaign about somebody whose Pennsylvania cred was questioned, in this case successfully, for Dr. Oz, they're going to hear the same thing and they're going to say, oh, yeah, that's right. Guy's not from here. So I think Republicans are going to have a challenge. I think Bob Casey is a tough candidate. And if Donald Trump is the nominee, as it appears he will be, McCormick has to kind of straddle that MAGA fence and try to appeal to people that aren't on it and people who are on it as a Republican. So early money would say Casey, but Berwood and Steve and Tony, as you know, the world has gone crazy. Anything can happen.
Steve, anything you would add?
No, I don't have much I can add. I am looking forward to just not being able to watch any sort of TV, YouTube, turn on the radio without getting blasted with about 5 bazillion ads come I don't know, conservatively I'll say May, about why each of the candidates are the best or the worst thing that ever happened to America.
Yes. Well, this has been a wonderful discussion. I'll end it this way. Each of you take a few minutes and just, there's any particular issues or candidates that you'll be watching next year.
Well, I'll start. I mean, just the race we just talked about, that will be for me very, very interesting because most of my career has been writing about Pennsylvania politics. This will be another chapter in a big race in Pennsylvania politics. Let me just say, you know how Bob Casey uses that map of Pennsylvania on social media? Anytime election, he goes on with a prop of a map of the state and does an explainer like Carnegie on MSNBC. Well, and I saw a recent one where he was on with his map. All the counties were covered over with like a Post-it note, and he was going to name all the counties and then pull off and show you where they were. Very talented, no question. But Arlen Specter, who prided himself when he was in the Senate as visiting every single county, every one of the 67 counties, every single year of his incumbency, could name the counties without a map. I've seen him do it. I've been in his presence. I was in his presence too many times with people who say, Arlen, can you name all the counties? And I would say, oh, no, God, please don't make him do. But he can do it without the map. When Casey can do it without the map, then we know he'll be our next senator.
John, can you do it without the map?
I don't think I could, Steve, honestly. I could get a lot of them, but I don't think I could do it without the map.
Steve and Berwood, anything you'll be looking for that we should be watching?
Well, I'll just say, of course, with John, I'm fascinated to see how Casey runs because he's never really been challenged. I think his closest race has been like 9 points. So for him to have a top tier challenger is different. I agree. I think he's when it comes to PA politics, his is one of the main names that and one of the strongest brands. So I'll certainly be watching that. But I think the state legislature is something else that's worth watching. And there are a couple of suburban seats in the Senate in particular that have the potential. I think there are 4 state Senate seats that have Republican incumbents that could be contested, or they're expected to be contested. I mean, we haven't had a Republican or a Democratic Senate, that I can remember. John, when was the last time? It's been
there was very briefly one, but then it got turned over because of election, if you can believe it, problems in Philadelphia.
I can't believe that, but But yeah, so there are some. I think the state legislative elections are going to be really interesting to watch. There's a potential of something going on there in the Senate. I think there are 4 specific districts that people are thinking about, and of course how closely contested the state house is. So we shouldn't sleep on those elections either, because there is a group injecting large sums of money to support Democratic candidates in state legislative races, and that amount of money could make a difference.
And Steve, have you got anything you would add? And
Yeah,
should we looking at?
I'm a Harrisburg guy, so I will definitely say, with the legislature, we've had Josh Baer had an unproductive first year so far. Election years sometimes tend to get everybody on notice that, hey, we need a campaign on something. We can't just run as guys who did nothing. Do a few deals get made in 2024? Do we see vouchers return? Do we see a minimum wage increase? Do we see some stuff pop up that impacts people's lives? Legislative races are always going to be fascinating coming off of that. The amount of money that's going to pour in is going to boggle everyone's mind. And also Attorney General is up. That's going to be a messy Democratic primary. It's looking like it could be a messy Republican primary. We have our state row offices, Auditor General, Treasurer. This is the stuff I could tempt myself with in Harrisburg, but local state government's close to you, so pay attention.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. It was a wonderful evening of discussion. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and also to the audience out there, we wish you well, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and good night.
Good night. Thanks, Tony.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks, Tony.
Good night.
Show on the Voice 17104. We will be here on the Voice 17104 every first and third Tuesday from 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m.
Hey, you guys have a good Thanksgiving.
Thanks
Hey,
for viewing.
you too, John. See ya.
Facebook at Richard Utley, and we welcome